Hey Natasha, starting journal entry 3 here for our urban education course. And the itinerary for this video is going to be similar to my previous. I'm going to connect it to my former journal entry, discuss some of my first day thoughts of my practicum and connecting it into ideas of urban education before concluding on our latest class, which was on January 13th, and some of my thoughts and wonderings from that course, or class more rather. Firstly, I want to connect back to the ideas that I was talking about last video. Specifically, I was trying to work in my head what might be some of the differences between suburban and urban education and what kind of different teaching practices one might use. Um, One thing I realized is the geographical location does not have much to do with as much to do with urban education as perhaps I originally thought. As we kind of discussed at the end of course, my new placement school um, I'll keep disclosed for confidentiality purposes, is located in a suburban neighborhood, but possesses many of the qualities that we would typically associate to an urban school in terms of high population density, diverse ethical population, um, and a very diverse group of learners from multiple IB courses to essentials courses and lifestyle and alt ed courses as well. So well, it really disrupted my idea of urban education in the sense that even if you may be in an affluent suburb, features of urban education, more often not, do crop up in schools in those areas as well. Um, One such feature that I noticed in my placement that specifically stood out to me was how would I call this? Perhaps excessive behavior management, specifically in the form of one of these guys. This is a whistle. It shows up there clearly. This is an old referee whistle I had from soccer when I used to referee soccer. But however, it's not very unlike the ones that many teachers in my new placement school will carry around. And unfortunately, it's not uncommon for teachers to blow the whistle as such to gain students' attention in class or to remedy behavioral and management issues. For instance, if a student might be bickering back and forth in class, it's not uncommon for a teacher to disrupt the argument. Now, I found this practice to be very problematic for a number of reasons. Um, I felt it was very animalistic in a sense to be blowing a whistle at children. I think it does them a disservice. I think it humiliates them, makes them feel, less than the bright and capable individuals that many of them are. Um, and I just feel it does a disservice to the students in class who are trying their best to engage and in no way disrupting the class because, as you can hear with a whistle, every single person in the class is going to hear that. You might drop your pen. You might look back to see what the distraction caused the whistle to be blown in the first place. So I didn't really feel it was a very effective method to be policing behavior in the classroom at all. And as I mentioned previously, I think it really does a disservice to the students and almost, uh, puts them on the same playing field as animals being corralled by a farmer's whistle. Um, However, it did make me question why we find that the silver whistle right here is so acceptable in sports, specifically in refereeing and corralling students in sports or managing disagreements on the field or gaining students' attention on the field. But when we see this object in the classroom, it breeds a lot of animosity, breeds a lot of distrust and discomfort. In fact, one of my students actually told me, Mr. McDonald, please, 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 when you're a certified teacher, do not ever use the whistle. You could just tell by the expression on her face that this was not an effective behavioral management strategy for her, and it was more often a distraction rather than something that was going to, bring the attention back to the teacher during their lesson. Finally, I'd like to conclude on our excellent class that we shared on January 13th. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the privilege activity we did, in which we all listened to a series of 20 questions and added up our score and had placed them on a piece of paper, which we held in front of us, before silently arranging ourselves from highest score to least. The biggest takeaway from this activity for me, and there was many, but the most important for me was the differences in what I expected and what my colleagues had put onto their pieces of paper. Um, in some cases I was very surprised by the numbers I've seen, specifically how my own judgments were skewed. For example, a lot of my classmates that typically look like me, white, uh, wearing middle class clothing. I typically expected them to be higher on this scale, such as myself. I was actually a 98, but I was surprised to see some 70s and some even high 60s as well. And what that told me, and what we kind of discussed in class as well, is that the amount of privilege someone experiences, or that they think they experience, has a lot to do with how they internalize the world, how they experience it subjectively. And we really do a disservice to others when we try and project our views or our opinions or our understanding of how much privilege that they may hold in their person. So I was glad that we had this activity because it really disrupted my judgments and really forced me to be reflexive of my own privilege. But most importantly, not to ascribe a privilege level or a certain identity to anyone, especially when I didn't know them or their circumstance. Translating that into my teaching practice, I'm definitely going to do this with my students, this activity or some form of it, and to ensure that I'm not doing the same disservice that I did to my colleagues onto my students, because that would be problematic and potentially disastrous. Sorry, this video has gotten much longer than I anticipated, Tassia, but a lot on my mind with this class. So thanks for everything, and looking forward to the next class and my next journal entry. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye now.